right, Zig coming in on the top. Today on the show, we have James Cook. James is a singer-songwriter, guitarist, bassist, musician extraordinaire. His new project is called Captain Audio's Project. James has been in a plethora of groups, including The Wags and Trash Can Joe. This was a pleasant and inspired conversation I had with James, and I'm excited to share it with you guys. Captain Audio's Project is James's first solo endeavor. The album is called Waiting for the Moon. It's available on all streaming platforms. Before we get any further, we're going to listen to a track off Waiting for the Moon. This is a song called Really Hard to Find. Really Hard to Find, the album Waiting for the Moon, Captain Audio's Project, and James Cook is the performer on that one. James has got like a John Doe style to his voice. I like it. It's good. It was a beautiful record. Definitely check it out. Waiting for the Moon, available on all streaming platforms. I forgot to say at the top that James is a Portland located artist, right? And perhaps it was something to do with the Portland atmosphere, but our phone call conversation was broken up quite a few times at the beginning. So this interview is broken into two chunks, but it goes pretty seamlessly, and you probably wouldn't notice unless I pointed it out right here. But at one point, the conversation shifts and picks up in a different direction. Regardless, this was a very inspired conversation. James is a really insightful guy with many passions, and I think you guys are going to enjoy it. If you hear anything you like, if you can like, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests like James and sharing their insight with you. So without further ado, this is my conversation with James Cook.
Yeah, I'll tell you how it got started. Years back, I played in a band that I played upright bass in a band that toured a bunch. We toured up and down the west coast of the U.S., and then we also went to Europe several times. And my upright bass, which is a very old and somewhat delicate instrument, got completely trashed. And when I got done touring that particular instance, trashed. And so, when I sent it in for repairs, I decided to sort of research other options of what I could make. And I found actually found a washtub bass webpage dedicated to washtub basses. And it was called Tubatonia. Washtub basses, but the old-fashioned style of a washtub bass is a washtub with a stick and a string, and you pull on the stick to tighten the tension on the string, and that's how you change the note. And I started with that, and it wasn't really good enough for me because I wanted to play exact notes. I didn't want to, the old style washtub basses sort of sounded like whoop, 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 and it was a thump, but it wasn't really, have exact notes. And I heard that some people a style where they built a stationary stick that was attached to the washtub, and then they had an actual string attached to it that they could play up and down the neck. It was one string, but you could play up and down the stick and get exact notes. Neck, just like you would an upright bass. And then I discovered that I could use actually an upright bass string. I used an upright bass D string, which is a little bit lighter gauge, and I would tune it down to E. So you would have a low E string, basically, and you could get 2 octaves worth. Yeah, it was, with the length of the stick that I was using, the dowel that I was using, it allowed me to get 2 octaves worth of notes out of it, which is plenty to play anything. And so I built that, and I started playing in bands with it, and people liked it. And then, of course, it was pretty unique, but it actually sounded like an upright bass. Like most of the people I played with, you show up to a gig or a band practice with a trash can or a washtub bass, and people usually aren't very happy about it. They're like, "That's really fun. Why don't you just go do that by yourself?" And but everybody that I played with were like, "Man, I can't tell the difference. It sounds like an upright bass. That's totally cool." And so I did that for a while, and then I just had this brainstorm. I was like, well, wouldn't it be really cool to have a band that was all homemade instruments? If it was,
Yeah.
if it was just like a homemade instrument band. And so, I played tenor guitar at the time, and I still do. That's what I do is play tenor guitar. And so I thought maybe I could make, I really thought it was a joke. Like I didn't think it was going to work. And so I thought, well, maybe I could play tenor guitar as or build a tenor guitar out of found objects. And so what I did is I got a 10 gallon trash can and cut the bottom 4 inches off of it and used that as the face. And then I put the lid on the back and used that as sort of like the resonator banjo back. And then I built a sort of a wood bracing interior and used a resonator cone out of from National Guitar. If you're familiar with resonator guitars. And then somebody gave me an old Gibson banjo neck, and so I used that to attach to it, and it actually sounded great. I was like, "Wow, this sounds great!" And so that's what inspired me to actually start the band Trash Can Joe. I figured, well, this is going to work. I had another buddy who made a slide guitar out of a little small trough, galvanized steel trough, and then we had a trumpet player. He was the only real instrument. I tried to make something like that out of homemade stuff, but that was a little more difficult. But it was inspiring. It was inspiring to be able to do that, and the whole concept was, to build these things and actually have them sound like real instruments.
Yeah. That's that's incredible.
It was pretty successful. And if you want to, you could check it out. There's some, if you just look up Trash Can Joe on YouTube, you'll find some videos out there of us, doing our thing. There's quite a few videos on YouTube of us playing. So, but it's a great band, super fun band. We've been together now for like almost 23 years, actually doing this.
And it's the same Trash Can Joe holding up.
It's the two original members are myself and Jason Wells plays the cornet. And so he's the horn player, and we were the ones that really kind of headed it off. And so we're the two original members. My buddy Mike, the original slide guitar player, moved on eventually, and we've had several bass players run through the band, but I think the current band has been pretty much the same band for the last 8 to 10 years, something like that. We've had a few different people. Not everybody wants to stick around.
It's hard for any project. You know what I mean? Like, if a project's going to exist, it's got to be able to flex and be interchangeable. You know what I mean? Like, it has to be able to keep going like that. So is the bass that was getting trashed, is that the 100-year-old upright that you have?
That is my 100-year-old upright. Yeah. So, it's a beautiful instrument. I love it. And it's, one of my favorite instruments to play. And I gig with it all the time. I play jazz gigs with it usually a couple times a month at least.
And is that a trio type gig? Is this a gig when you say jazz gig, like what is it? Just like an instrumental type jazz? Is it backing a singer? Is it all the above?
It's both. I play. I'll get hired to play. I do a fair amount of there's a pretty good gypsy jazz scene here.
Cool. Yeah.
And then Django Reinhardt style music, and then I have a band that I play consistently with that's sort of an Andrews Sisters style band where there's 3 female lead vocalists, and we do old school like Andrews Sisters, Boswell Sisters style vocal jazz.
That's sick, man.
Yeah, it's fun. I like it. It's keeps and occasionally I'll get hired to do more rock oriented stuff. I actually play in one band that is a backup band for burlesque dancers, and we'll do
we'll do popular music. We did like we'll just do a variety of more modern popular music, but I'll still do it on the upright bass. I'll hack it out on the upright. It gives it a unique sound. We'll do like whatever we did, like what's that new singer's Red Wine Supernova?
Okay, yeah.
Chapel Roan.
Yeah.
We've done a couple Chapel Roan songs, or we'll do like a Fiona Apple song, or we'll do any variety. I think we did an Aerosmith song last time, "Sweet Emotion," which is kind of a challenging bass line, especially on upright bass. But we just a variety of stuff. You could do anything on upright bass that's done on other. It's on a regular bass. It's just sometimes it's a little bit more challenging, which I like. I like the challenge of doing that.
Yeah, just the physicality of it is a different approach. So one thing I find interesting is like you started off with you started off with trumpet, right?
Actually, saxophone was first, and then after 2 years of that, my parents took me to the orthodontist, and the orthodontist said that the saxophone was contributing to my overbite, and that I would have to stop playing it, which I was really bummed about, because my best friend at the time was also playing saxophone, and we were both in the elementary school band, and so I ended up switching to trumpet, and as you could imagine, like I ended up getting braces on my teeth. Yeah. And trying to play trumpet with braces was just like awful. I mean, I did it for a year, but that's what put me off horns, and that eventually, I guess I could be grateful for it, because it's really what eventually made me put me on playing guitar.
Was it in that, because like I have a relate to that at that musical like start to your journey, because like I kind of with the school stuff I never got into any of the horns or anything like that, or really had an opportunity, even though I kind of wanted to play trumpet, or no, I think I wanted to do drums, and they're like, you should do trumpet. I was like, nah, I don't know, but eventually falling on guitar, and like the more like the guitar for me became like a thing. Okay, this is a thing I can do and I want to do. It almost was like from that point on was kind of like putting the barriers down to other things. So like not resisting playing bass and being a bass player in a band, or not resisting, you know what I mean? Like learning from a DJ or whatever, taking all these musical lessons in different outlets. So like to jump from a guitar and guitar player, cause you were, what I read, we're getting into like some more Hendrix stuff, right?
Yeah, I really loved Hendrix. That was one of when I first started playing electric guitar, when I was a teenager, I just fell in love with Hendrix, and I had a couple LP records, and I would just scratch up the records, like, learning everything he did. I was just completely enamored with his playing and his style, and just the whole picture of what he was about really enamored me, and so I spent a lot of my time locked up in my bedroom, just with my Jimi Hendrix records, just learning how to play that stuff.
It's so coming from that, it's like, what records did you have? Do you remember which ones?
Well, I had I probably had all of the available Hendrix records that were made while he was alive. There was Are You Experienced, Electric Ladyland. There was oh my gosh,
Axis Bold as Love.
Axis Bold as Love, and I think there was one that was just called the Jimi Hendrix Experience. So I think there was probably just four main ones that were done and of course there was a lot of stuff that came out posthumously that were like tracks that some recording studio had that they maybe finished and added stuff to, and weren't really Hendrix albums per se, but somebody had the idea they could make money off of him.
But so like to not drop that, but to kind of shift attention in a way and pick up the upright bass and then have all these opportunities kind of open. It's like kind of like I being a bass player gets you like so many more gigs than a guitar player. It's crazy.
Without a doubt.
It's comical.
It's crazy. Well, there's that old joke where the little kid goes, his mom gets him bass lessons, and he goes through the first lesson, and his mom says, "Oh, so honey, what you learned today?" And he's like, "Well, I learned how to play E," and then he goes to the second one, and the mom says, "What'd you learn today?" And he says, "Oh, I learned how to play A." And he goes to the third one, comes home, and the mom goes, "What'd you learn today?" And he goes, "Oh, nothing. I had a gig."
It's true. So like kind of like when you started working on Upright, like, or what was the transition like from kind of like this like kind of rock leaned type of playing and like Obsession, and like was original music at that time as well, and then what kind of led to entering like picking up the Upright and kind of going into this direction of jazz?
Well, I had been in art school for graphic design, and I had transferred to a campus in San Francisco, and I met this jazz bass player that I wanted to take lessons from, and I started taking lessons from him, and he played upright and electric, and I was over at his house with a lesson and just picked up his upright bass and started playing it, and was like, wow, this is just really amazing. I felt like I really wanted to learn how to play this instrument. I had been playing electric bass, and I had played, not really, I had played some fusion style jazz, rock, mixtures of jazz and rock. And I just decided, well, this is an amazing instrument, and it's a huge challenge. And I wanted to just have that, I've always loved a really a good challenge that felt like it was, maybe not even possible. I just thought, well, okay, this is going to be tough, but I want to learn how to do it. And at the time, I started playing this, and I probably only had it for about 6 months, and got into 2 different bands, because how it is. It's like, it's one thing to be a bass player, because you'll get lots of gigs as a bass player, but if you have an upright bass, then that opens up a whole nother people really want the upright bass. And so I got into this sort of old-timey jug band. That was the one that I ended up touring a bunch with. And then I got into this band. It was run by a guy named Adam Levy, who eventually went on to become Nora Jones's guitar player for a bunch of her Grammy-winning albums. But that was a really high-level thing, and that was a great education. I was way over my head in that band because all the players were like super pro players, and I was just still learning my instrument. The drummer was the timpani player for the San Jose Symphony, and the sax player had played with a bunch of really high level bands. I think he had played with Huey Lewis and the News, if you remember those guys.
Yeah, no way.
So just really great players, and I was literally like just doing everything I could to keep up with it. I probably had some embarrassing moments actually, but it was taking that risk that upped my game. It was really a learning experience, and taking a chance like that really opened up a whole new world for me. What actually, although the other band was what really kind of kind of led me down the path that I ended up going, which was the sort of the old timey jug band jazz influence, because that really changed the way I wrote music. I think at the time prior to that, I was, I had some lessons, and I was, but I had never gone to a music school per se at that point, and my theory knowledge was pretty sparse. And when I started playing this old time jazz, it was just so obvious. It's sort of like, you start playing these old jazz standards, and it's like music theory 101.
Yeah.
It really kind of opens up all the aspects of chordal movements and everything associated with what we teach in schools for music theory. And at that time I also realized that I would have to up my game, and so I started taking music theory classes just to get better at that aspect of it. So it really opened up my musicality. At that time it was a little bit of a renaissance for me, just learning and trying to get better at my craft. And but those the old timey jug band jazz stuff that I was doing, that's what sparked me to start writing. And that was the time when I started playing tenor guitar, 4-string guitar, and that's when I started writing in that vein, which really I don't know, kind of influenced what I did from then on as far as a writing style. It really changed my writing style. I used to tell people that prior to that I was a quote unquote sensitive singer songwriter, and then after that I sort of became an insensitive singer songwriter. Mainly just because a lot of that music from the 1920s and 30s was Depression era, and the music had a quality to it that was humorous. A lot of times there was a lot of because the times were so tough, music was the levity that brought people out of those bad times, and there was a lot of humorous music back then. People like Fats Waller and Hoagy Carmichael wrote music that was had humor in it. And then so for a long time, that's what I did, is I wrote music that had humorous aspects to it, that was that I felt like was going to have some levity to it. And then it came it kind of became came full circle, and I eventually started getting a little bit more serious, or just writing about stuff that was really more connected to me. I think one of the things that it did is it just made me find my voice and allowed me to write from the heart, and write music that was really about my life or things that were affecting my life, as opposed to prior to that, where a lot of my music that I wrote was, I don't want to say fantasy, but it was contrived. I was making it up. And once I really found this sort of voice to write in, I was able to connect to what was going on with my own life and sort of interject that into my music.
No, that one on a to kind of dive into the songwriting bit of that. I think like there's like when you lower the bar in a way that kind of like if it's comedic at first, it's almost easier to lean into it. Honestly, because there's kind of that shield of like, it's kind of a bit. You know what I mean? Like it's leading to a punchline. There's like in a way, and like. And just examining everything you just said, like to work through jazz like that, because I went to Cleveland State to study jazz as well, and like I mean, it's a completely different experience than what you described, so I shouldn't say as well. But like, you know, what I mean, it's like that's a real deal run of it when you're spending that much time like analyzing these tunes and seeing how the structures work and how these songs are building up, and then like the process of that, along with the melody and the harmony and the structure, the lyrics that lead up to it, and having that kind of like punchline that they build up to, or the kind of like lyrics that are being brutally honest in a humorous way, like to see how all that is fitting together is kind of like the perfect storm of leading to experimenting in your own right as far as songwriting.
You're right.
One thing I wanted to ask, during that process of playing with the other group, like as you're like, because like I've found myself doing the same thing in ensembles. Like I still recall one of the biggest like flops I've ever did in a jazz ensemble, which was trying to do a chord melody of How High the Moon, and the band was playing it at a tempo that I didn't learn the melody by itself. I just learned the chord melody. So I was trying and I could not keep it up, and it just biffed. Like, but I learned later, you know, okay, we got to learn but anyway, and that tune can get cooking, you know.
I love that tune.
Right, it's a good tune, man. And like, but anyway, so like I have that memory ingrained, that biff. But
all those failures haunt you for a long time.
But as you're like prepping to hang with these cats that are really cooking at a higher level, what did, like, aside, so you're studying music theory, what are some of the kind of like, were you taking songs that you knew you're doing in this group and analyzing them as well? Like, what were some of your kind of techniques you used to hang with the guys that were flying higher?
Well, I was just, you know, definitely taking some of the music that I learned, and a good example would be like the song "It's Only a Paper Moon." I don't know if you're familiar with that song, but you know, it's kind of a classic. You know, it starts with a 2-5-1 progression, and so once I realized, you know, kind of what was going on, I started writing songs. Like I would steal, you know, not necessarily steal, but, you know, borrow these chord progressions and then write my own lyrics to them. And in the process, you know, with that combined with, you know, studying, you know, chord theory, I started making, you know, connecting the dots about what was actually going on. You know, you know, in my early musical career, I learned pretty much by ear, you know, just by playing records and learning the stuff. So I knew the sounds and I could hear the sounds, but I never really learned, like a lot of people will learn music and go, okay, well, you know, here's the 1 chord, here's the 5 chord, 1-5, 1-5, 1-4, 1-4, you know, or 1-6-2-5 or whatever. And I was bad with numbers. And so I never learned that way. I never, you know, I learned, you know, it's like, well, this is an A chord, A minor chord, this is that chord, this is that chord. I didn't really associate it with numbers until I started studying music theory, which, you know, there's a great advantage to that. And I feel like I was a little bit handicapped for a lot of years by not understanding that, because, you know, people would say, oh, let's just play this. It's you know, it's a 2-5-1. You know, I'd be like, I don't know what that means. You know, I you know, tell me the chords. You know, tell me what the chords are. You know, and so you know, this whole process of learning chord theory and you know, and then applying it. You know, like I mentioned earlier, these classic jazz tunes are sort of like music theory 101, because they are the basic chord theory is just sort of laid out there. You know, it's like, well, you know, okay, the 7 chord is often going to be a diminished chord, you know, leading to the tonic, or you know, don't end on a 4, you know, don't end your song on a 4, you know. But, you know, once I started understanding that, then associating with that, it made playing music a lot easier, for sure. You know, I you know, because I would be able to, you know, not only communicate with other musicians a little bit better, but I understood the structure of music a little bit better. And that certainly made playing with other musicians. I felt like the whole time I was playing with these really high level guys, I was just kind of seat of the pants. I wasn't really, I played with them for about a year, and I don't. It was one of those things where, as I look back on it, if I knew what I didn't know back then, I probably would have been afraid to do it. But I was I just had kind of a go for it attitude. I just felt like, well, this opportunity is here, and it's it may be over my head, but I'm just gonna, Adam, the guitar player, recognized that I had a good ear and that I could pick up his original music and play it pretty quickly. And he liked that about me. I think one of the other things that got me that gig is his previous bass player, who was an incredible musician, but he was also one of these guys who played the bass like it was a bass solo the whole time. He played just a lot of notes, and he was light years better than me, still is, like as far as his skill level, he was, really a highly trained and skilled musician. But Adam liked the fact that I played the bass, and this has always been my opinion about the bass anyway, is that, the bass is the foundation. It's not really, one of my favorite quotes is the late great Ray Brown, the jazz bass player. Ray Brown said, "I never got hired to do a solo. I got hired for my bass playing." And so and that's how I've always felt about the bass. If you want to be out front, play the guitar or play the saxophone, or do that thing. But the bass is a foundational instrument, and there's a lot of power in that. The bass is truly the harmonic center of the musical universe. It is the foundation that the house is built on, and if it's not there, if it's not solid, then everybody knows it. And conversely, if it's there and solid and rock solid, people might not notice it, but they would certainly notice if it wasn't there. It was like that whole thing, like, the bass should be felt and maybe not, noticed, and I used to, even as a guitar player back in the day, as a bass player and a guitar player, but when I was playing guitar in electric bands, I always felt like, okay, if you notice the bass is probably playing too many notes, because you really want the bass to be, foundational, except in jazz, obviously, Jocko changed all that for a lot of people. And of course, straight ahead jazz, a bass will take a solo, but other than the solo, you want that bass to be playing its role. The bass should have a role, that's why it was sort of like, I really kind of got away from mainstream jazz once 6-string electric basses came out, because I was like, just play the guitar if that's what you want.
It definitely to be felt is I think an important. I think that's some wise words on that, because it definitely it is the placement of that. It's the tying between the rhythm section and it's tying of the rhythm section to the melody. Like, it really does have a foundational role, and that's what makes everything work. And when it's not there. So but that's also like coming from a musician and an artist standpoint. It's like one of those things you learn on the job of how to fit in as a bass player. And I'm sure that mindset's got you more gigs past that other one, past Adams, later because of that.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of freedom if you recognize how your freedom is allocated with the bass. because your choice of notes changes everything. You don't have to be, you can play rhythmically on the beat. You could play, a straight 4/4 swing and just be playing quarter notes, but your choice of notes changes the music dramatically, and so, there's a lot of power in that, and obviously, you want to be playing the right notes, or at least, good notes that harmonize
The
well
ones that fit the
with,
song best, whatever.
yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But aside from that, especially, and this is what I love about swing, the swing jazz style, is that, I oftentimes will play tunes and I won't even be concentrating on the actual chords necessarily. I'll be concentrating on key centers and where I'm going with it, because I'm walking the bass all the time and going from one place to the next. And, I might pass through, 5 different chords that a keyboard or a guitar player will be playing. And I'm not, I'm, hitting all notes that are in those chords, but I'm not going to necessarily hit the tonic, or the 5 or the 4. I might be hitting the minor 3, or something, in those chords as I'm passing through them. And so you have a lot of freedom. There's a lot of freedom as long as you are, well enough connected to know what notes to play. There's a lot of freedom in what you can play.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely, because I've also played bass in a few jazz quintets. I should say 1 or 2, but there is as long as you know the destination of the song, how you get there is as long as it's in the pocket works. Like if you follow if you're in the right lane and you're going the right direction, if you're going with traffic in the right lane, there's a lot of ways you can get there.
Yep, that's for sure.
So from kind of understanding this kind of perspective on how to fit in and how to find freedom within a confound of musical structures, and experimenting with these chord progressions to kind of write your own, which is the only way any of us do anything. You know what I mean? It's inescapable that you're going to have a 2-5-1 in one of your songs, or a 1-4-5, or any, those are just just how it's the words that we use, but
yeah, it's the language of music for sure.
Right. So how have you found that kind of spot in as a bass player affecting how you write songs?
Well, that's an interesting question. I have written songs on the bass, but most of the music I've written has been on tenor guitar, just because of the the greater voicings that you have. And the music that I write is typically, I do write instrumental music, but predominantly I write lyric-based music. And so having a chordal voiced instrument to back that up makes it a lot easier. The first song, and I use this as an example, the Paper Moon, or there was another Nat Cole Trio song called Bring Another Drink. It was also very similar to Paper Moon. It was like a 2-5-1. And so I used that 2-5-1 progression to write one of my first songs in that vein. And I was just playing bass at the time. And so I wrote it on bass. And there has been a couple others that I wrote on bass, but I think during that period when I was starting to do that, that was also the beginning of my transition into tenor guitar, or the discovery of tenor guitar. I can't call it a transition because I still play the bass all the time. It was sort of a discovery of the tenor guitar as an instrument for me to use for writing. And so I predominantly write on that instrument now, and have pretty much for the last many, many years.
Gotcha. It's interesting. Tenor guitar is interesting in the aspect that you're playing like the bottom half of the guitar, and it's like like where it kind of fits is very close to like a banjo,
Yep.
without that
Yep.
fifth string, in a way.
Well,
But as
and
far
I
as
don't know
like,
if you know.
sorry,
I don't know if you know what a tenor banjo is. A four-string banjo,
right,
and in the 1920s, it was the main rhythm instrument
right,
because
right,
prior to amplification, the tenor banjo was the only thing loud enough that nobody was playing guitar because they weren't loud, and so the tenor banjo was this instrument that could cut through horn sections and be acoustically and be a viable rhythm instrument in that period. And then in the late 1920s, that's when National started coming out, when John DePera invented the National guitar, the resonator guitar. Then they started putting out tenor resonator guitars, and those were for the banjo players so that they could switch over and play guitar. And so that was sort of the birth of tenor guitar, was eventually. And then after that, in late 1920s, beginning of 1930s, is when amplification actually finally started being developed. And once that happened, you have like your Charlie Christian era, where you have early electric guitars started coming into prominence. But it was the tenor banjo was sort of the originator of all that, which was a four-string banjo. So the tenor guitar was just a offshoot from that instrument.
and so okay, with the new record, is that a tenor guitar resonator?
It is a tenor resonator guitar. And I just want to interject for a second, and I apologize about this. They're charged. Okay, say something.
Hey, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. I had the volume down.
Okay.
That's always something you should check.
True, but that's always like the last thing you do. You know what I mean? You're like, it's every other
Right.
problematic thing except for the one, of course. You know what I mean? Like, that's funny.
Right. You have the mute button on.
Yeah. Oh man, I mean, I'm sure you've done gigs where you've ran sound for the gig you're doing. Like, I work at a art gallery here, booking and running shows there, and like, it's always the dedoy. Oh, I forgot to unmute it. The chord's fine, because usually your mind goes straight to, oh, this chord's fucked.
Yeah, one of my most infuriating and scary experiences I have ever had was I was on tour in Europe, in Germany, and we were in what is the former East Germany, in the town of Dresden, and we were playing a club that was obviously used to having metal bands. It was a large club, and of course, we were an acoustic band, and so they weren't really accustomed to like dealing with our instruments. But we were doing a sound check in the afternoon, and the guy couldn't get the monitors to work, and he kept turning things up and nothing was coming out.
Yeah.
And we're standing on the stage, and all of a sudden he comes up to the front of the stage. He's like, "Oh, the monitor's unplugged," and he plugs it in, and
oh god,
it was just full on loud feedback that just blew us away. I literally walked out behind the club and threw up. That's how bad that it was. Like I had never experienced something like that before. It really, like, man, it was, so, yeah, and of course it was a classic, like, oh yeah, it's unplugged, and never mind turning it down before I plug it in. I'm just going to plug it in,
It's oh man, yeah, because when that catches you off guard, you're like, it wakes you, and like it's so funny because like at that moment you're like, I figured it out. I just got to plug it in. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I'm sure he was just elated that that's what the problem was, and he figured it out. but of course, it was that elation went away pretty quick,
With the
especially for the
sweet little
band.
doom.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Wait. Glad no one lost their hearing on that. That could be bad. That could be pretty gnarly.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It was certainly. It certainly made me dizzy.
Yeah, no, to
You know?
make you hurl. That's pretty rough.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just to say how much it affected my inner ears. I guess it just made me like sick to my stomach from that intense sound, and not to be trifled with. I guess I mean, it's a scary thing about dealing with loud sound systems.
Well, right. And what's interesting too is like how your ear is connected to the part that keeps your equilibrium in check, right?
Yep.
So like
Yep.
that makes a lot of sense it led to hurling. Like
Oh yeah. I mean, you could get one of the things like I'm almost done with my pilot's license, and one of the things you have to do when you're training, and you have to do actually as part of your check ride to get your license is they put you under what's called a hood, and this is it's like a visor that comes down that keeps you from being able to see outside the airplane. All you can see is your instruments. And what the instructor will do is he'll tell you to close your eyes, and then he'll turn the plane in some weird way, like a dive, or he'll point it really high up, or he'll turn it sideways, something crazy, and then you have to open your eyes and correct it by just looking at the instruments. And you have to have 3 hours of training under what they call under the hood. And let me tell you, man, after about 20 minutes of doing this stuff, you don't want to do it anymore ever.
Yeah.
Because you're just like, and airline pilots, who get instrument ratings for flying, or if you just want to get an instrument rating so you can fly into clouds and things like that, you have to have 40 hours of under the hood training, which is just I don't even want to think about it.
That's pretty intense, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I recall my cousin when he was learning to fly, he took us up with an instructor, and I just remember hurling in the back. It was a tiny little plane, just like it hit some type of G-force, and I was like, what? Like it rocks you, man.
It's not the same as a big airplane. You definitely, it's the difference of like, being in a kayak and being in a cruise ship, when you're talking about the difference between a small plane and a commercial airliner, there's just you feel every bump.
Well, what got you into flying? Like, what brought?
Well, that actually came about from my trips to the Minam River, which is where some of this material that I is on the record was written. There's a guest lodge that's it used to be an old hunting lodge, basically, and it's deep in the Wallowa Mountains in this area called the Minam River Valley, and there's no roads to it. And so there's 3 ways to get there. You can hike. If the snow level is high enough, it's about a 10-mile hike. If it's too low, it's more like a 21-mile hike or something like that. You can hike in like that, or you can pack in on a horse, or you can fly in on a bush plane, which is what I did because I had to get in there with some tools and stuff, and a bunch of guitar and whatnot, and the time, of course, it's only about a 20-minute flight by bush plane, as opposed to many hours if you want to hike it or take a horse. But so I had this job where I'm working in I still do it actually, where I go work in the backcountry at this guest lodge. It's kind of a fancy guest lodge. In the summertime, they charge a lot of money to have people come out, and they stay in these really nice cabins and have there's a chef out there, and they have this nice kitchen and a lodge and stuff where people can go stay deep in the wilderness where there is no roads, so it's not like people just wandering by or anyone can go there. And it's a really great experience. But in the off season, in the preseason and postseason, they have people like me come out there and do maintenance, take down dead trees, build trails and whatnot. And so for a month at a time, usually, or at least, several weeks, I'll go out there and just be deep in the wilderness. And it was, these experiences that inspired some of the music on the record. And also the experience of flying in. One of the parts of it was that the bush pilot that we use is this really incredible guy who has been doing it, probably nearly his whole life. And I think he's probably close to 80 years old.
Wow.
And so I found myself, he's really super experienced and a great pilot. But I found myself flying in thinking, okay, what happens if our pilot decides his number is up and we're still flying? Could I land this airplane? And I thought, well, no, I probably could not land this airplane, And so I went out, and I'd always been sort of nervous about flying anyway. But I decided, well, I'm going to take a lesson and see how it goes. And so I came back to Portland, and incredibly, I found an instructor who is a banjo player that I did a gig with many years ago.
That's
and
incredible.
So I thought, well, yeah, this is a good connection. And then so he took me up on the plane and let me fly it around for like an hour. And what I realized was that what made me nervous about flying was that I wasn't the one doing the flying. Once I was in control of the airplane, I was just like, man, this is great. I love this. I'm flying around. I am actually the one flying the plane. I'm in control. And I don't know what this says about me, but it just made me feel like I really wanted to do it. And that was sort of the driving force that got me into it. Once I started doing it, I was really just enamored with the fact that an average person like me could go and learn how to fly an airplane. And it's not unattainable. Oftentimes we think about it, I think sort of in terms of like a doctor or something, how when you're, especially when you're younger, you kind of look at, doctors as these infallible voices of authority and knowledge. They're higher beings, in our minds, the way we look at them. And the same with airline pilots or pilots. You think, well, this is just some amazing human being that I would never be able to do that kind of thing. It's beyond what I would do. But getting a pilot's license is really probably, I guess I would consider it on par with like getting an associate of arts degree at a city college. It takes, probably, for the average person, probably takes a couple of years and probably about the same amount of money as it would to get a associate arts degree at a community college. And so it's not for everybody. You do have to have a certain amount of innate coordination. And as they say, flying a plane is actually really easy. The hard part is landing a plane. and that takes some skill and some, like I was saying, and, it's kind of an innate ability that, some people just don't have. If you have some, if you have good coordination, good sense of spatial orientation, then most people that have that can learn how to do it. But, some people don't have that. Some people don't or may never have that kind of, innate abilities.
Yeah.
skill set. So, it's just like not everybody can become a musician. Most people can get trained to play an instrument, but that doesn't really make you a musician. You have to have that drive and passion and that desire to do it. And it's the same thing with being a pilot. A lot of people can get trained to be a pilot, but you really have to kind of want it to do it. You can't just you're not going to just go and do it and then be great at it if you think it's, if your parents said, hey, it's time to take your pilot lessons, go do it. So.
No,
yeah.
definitely. And I got to imagine there's like an aspect of those spatial awareness and like physical, motor movement skill set along with the knowledge of being able to understand what you're looking at, these gauges are like using the machine as well as those physical and like mental skill set and kind of marrying the two, which in that sense is very much like a music skill set, knowing the theory and marrying the physicality and feel.
Yeah. And then of course, when you find yourself in the thick of it, there's a lot coming at you. It's like it's like you get it's like the bass player joke where his third lesson was actually a gig. It's like if you just once you get into it, there's a lot getting you thrown at you at once. My flight instructor likes to say. Landing is like drinking through a fire hose. Trying to sip water through a fire hose. It's like there's so much happening at once that you you kind of have to go into. And this is what your I think they call your default mode network, where you have a portion of your brain that just automatically takes care of certain functions. And once you have done something enough times, it's created this pathway in your brain where your brain sort of goes, okay, I already know how to do this part of it. So that's sort of automatic. It's just like, pressing a gas pedal on your car. It's like when you're driving somewhere, you don't think about it anymore. And oftentimes you don't even think about, so oftentimes you get somewhere and you don't even remember driving there. And that's because your mind had that part of it sort of on lockdown in your default mode network. And it allows you to, allows your consciousness to think about other things, like, what's coming at you. What am I doing here? I'm just, my body is keeping the plane going straight. and my brain is looking outside going, okay, there's no other planes. The wind is, I'm correcting for the wind. I'm doing these other things. And, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, I know. But and I'd wonder, and this would have to be like probably some very specific study done. And like, there'd have to be a lot of parameters to it. But I wonder if if training, musical training has a correlation to some degree with like understanding, like, because your teacher was a banjo player, right? So I wonder if there's like a default mode network like growth that comes from training through like music that has other benefits, such as like being able to do multitask thing like land a plane. Like
I believe it is. Yeah, I certainly believe it is. In my case, I feel like it's the ability to actually do more than one task at the same time. And so, like, for instance, singing and playing guitar,
right?
Or just playing guitar with your two hands doing different things, picking with one hand and fingering notes with the left hand. It's all that ability to have at least one thing sort of on autopilot, so that you can do other tasks and put your general focus on something else that requires it. And so, yeah, it's all I think, I mean, as they often say about music, it's a really great way to keep your brain functioning at a high level, even as you get older, being able to still, think of things in complex terms. And it's just a great exercise for your brain, really, to do those kind of activities. Creates these pathways that I think keep your synapses a little bit more vital. It's just basically, exercising your brain like a muscle. You're actually keeping things going because it's being used. Use it or lose it, as they say.
Right. Well, and there's also, I think you'd find out, you might have read this book, but there's this new book that came out by an author, Daniel Levitin. It's called I Heard There Was a Secret Chord, and it's kind of a follow-up to his first book, which is Your Brain on Music.
Okay. I haven't read either one of those, but they sound good.
I think you'd really enjoy them.
What was the first one you mentioned? Something about a secret chord?
Yeah, I Heard There Was a Secret Chord. It's his newest book, and it basically is music as medicine, and it goes into a lot of like neural research based on that, and like he's a neuroscientist and a producer, or was a producer and a musician. And so it's a really interesting dive into the effects music has on that. And he also wrote another book called Successful Aging, which like isn't as music focused, but like it's really interesting how music affects how music listening and playing affects the human brain, and how many like activities and like spots that are going on, those neuro synapses are firing, and like how much is actually going on when you do an activity like that. So it's definitely definitely I think you'd get a kick out of it. It's a really good read.
It sounds great, and
it's presented in a very like, you don't have to be a neuroscientist or to understand the like it's presented in a way where it's not just
in layman's terms.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he gets in there, but it's also brought to you in a way where you're guided down the path to understand what everything's happening. So you don't have to be.
It sounds like he makes it accessible.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. Like it's definitely you'd get a kick out of it. But anyway, but like,
it's like the Rain Man or whatever. It's like just an amazing, and I love that. I mean that's I had it was funny. It came up in the interview after I was done talking to you yesterday. Yeah. I went on to a different interview, and one of the last questions the interviewer asked was, "What's your special power?"
Whoa.
and I it took me by surprise, and I don't think I really adequately answered that question, because that's something you really kind of have to think about. I was like, well, and I don't think I answered it well. I was kind of reaching for, my special power right now is I'm learning to fly an airplane, I guess. But if I was really to think about it, well, my special power is that I have this really great ability to connect with animals, even animals that are disgruntled or that other people have trouble, getting along with or reaching. I have this just ability to, maybe it's my calmness, or maybe it's just something that they sense in me that calms them. But I have this ability that's a superpower. But, that finding that, as a teacher with people with autism, I'm sure part of your efforts are to find what their superpower is, because we all have this superpower. Not all of us have something that's super evident as a superpower, but, a lot of kids in that realm, they've got one thing that they can really focus on and do really well. And it's we all, it should be a goal to foster that, and not, it's I guess in society, it's tough that like kids with autism get a little bit marginalized when, maybe we find out what their superpower is and exalt them that way, or give them,
Yeah.
props for, what they can do.
And I definitely agree with that, and I think that we can expand that to just like any kid anywhere or any person anywhere. Everyone has like this underlying thing that is profound, right? And that's a really interesting. Like when he brought up that question to you, I was like, how would I answer that? I'm like, I don't even know. That's a doozy. What you know what I mean? Like that's a good question.
It definitely blindsided me a little bit. Yeah, in fact, I thought about it so much that I thought, well, I need to have an answer in case somebody asks me that question again sometime.
Well, I think you got it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I got it now. I did think about it a lot.
That's incredible. That's a great question. I might use that one down the line.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You take that.
But yeah, I definitely think everyone has something strange and unique to offer, and like, and strange isn't the right word, but unique and like amazing that they can do, and it's really interesting. Like, and I think most of the time, the person who has that unique thing to offer doesn't even know it. You know what I mean? Like they don't even think of it as a thing, and I think that'd be the majority of people. And like it's to bring it all around, it is really cool on one end to be able to like look at people in that sense as a gig, as a job. Like, all right, we're looking at all these things that need assistance, but check this out, and that just brings this kind of like appreciation and gratitude to that one skill set or that one thing. And then like it's a cool thing to be able to celebrate, not just within. It's a skill I find doing out of work a lot as well too.
Right. Yeah, it's not just in what you're doing. Well, I would give for instance, here is my girlfriend is she works with people with developmental disabilities.
Okay, all right.
And she's not doing this currently, but she did for a long time work for this group who they were called Project Pro, and they basically were it was an art class for people with developmental disabilities, and so she would teach art to these people, and these it was some of this art is incredible. In fact, they would have they would sell some of this art. They would have a showing and sell some of the people's art for them. And we have several pieces now, and you can look at these art pieces in amazement sometimes. These paintings that these guys do, men and women do, that are because they're just not subject to the same filters that we put on ourselves, and so, there's just this incredible pureness and connection that they have, and it comes out, in whatever forms, and so it was really neat to see, the paintings that some of these people would do. Some of these people were completely nonverbal, or, or had, both physical and mental disabilities. Some people were just almost quadriplegic, but still were able to, with some help, do this, go through these processes and create art. And it's just amazing to see what would come out of that, and so it's just such amazing. I really love the fact that there was a program actually like this existed, for people to allow them to express themselves in these ways that, might not otherwise do. Society doesn't really support that very well. Of course, in the current political climate, it seems like it's going to get less and less.
Which is awful. And like, and I think like, but I think it's just those experiences and seeing how moving they are, not just for you, but for them, and like knowing that that's what this entails. Like, I think that's going to keep it going, and like with a lot of the positive things that may get cut or diminished. It's the interaction we had with them and the need that we need to continue them is going to keep that, hopefully keep those grassroots awesome things happening.
I think so. I think there's always going to be people that care, and there's always going to be, people like yourself that are into it, not, to make millions of dollars. They're into it to help people, and there's always going to be people that are willing, that want to do that want to make their mission in life to make other people's lives better. And that's, it's great. We're lucky that happens, and hopefully, that we get as a society, get away from this, consciousness that seems to be pervasive of, just take whatever you can, and that's the whole, it's interesting. I grew up, with my best friend growing up, had a difficult life growing up. He was from France, and he came to the United States because he got for operation, because when he was a little kid, he got tuberculosis in his hip from drinking unpasteurized milk.
Oh, whoa.
And his parents, who were well off enough, could come to the United States and have surgery. So when I met him in elementary school in like first grade, he was in a body cast. And he had kind of a rough outlook on life. He was a little bit aggressive and angry, and he kind of carried that through his life. He's a great guy, and he I think is a good person now, much more. When he was younger, he just kind of had this like aggressive attitude, like, I have to, get an advantage over someone else. It's always like, how can I have the advantage over somebody else? He used to have this book called Think and Grow Rich. It's kind of a classic, how do you make $1 million? And he used to tell me, he's like, James, if I could just get $1 from 1 million people, and that was his whole philosophy. It's like, well, okay. Maybe there's other things that you could do with your life. I actually told him, I was like, buddy, the way you make $1 million is you write a book on how to make $1 million.
Bob boom.
Yep, exactly.
Oh man. Well, that is wild, and I think people carry that, but also I think kind of going back to what we were talking about before, having these kind of outlets that kind of encompass more of your brain and more of these emotions, like music or flying or cooking or whatever creative outlet it may be. I think that if there's room in that, there's kind of this give and take already within the process of learning how to do a skill like that, where you have to like be given instruction and inspiration to do it, and that comes from someone who's willing to do it. And I think by experiencing that from the rip, like this whole thing of like, if we stick with music, like playing music is a very like a way you it's a thing for you, but also by doing it, you're giving to a bunch of different ways. You're showing people that they can follow their own pursuits. You're elevating the mood, hopefully in the right situation, and like, but also there's that kind of already like pass down, continue on thing that comes within music, and like, or just any creative endeavor. That I think like having that at an early age and having just that insight kind of like changes that outlook and maybe loosens that grip on what you can take.
Sure. I feel like once you get exposed to art, which, to me, like my music has always been something that I've really done for myself. It's something that you can do for yourself that can also bring other people joy. But I feel like bringing other people joy, is almost a byproduct of me, like, enjoying so much what I'm doing, that there is this, spread of joy that comes out from that, that you're expanding on that beyond just the borders of your own like enjoyment of that thing. But you mentioned like learning that when you're young, I think will change the way you think about life later on. I think music, just the act of learning art or learning to do art, and that aspect of it, that hey, I learned how to do something that makes other people happy, as opposed to I'm just learning how to be aggressive and take more that I should have, or take as much as I can get, and this is the way life is. You just got to take whatever you can get. And I suppose when you look at nature, some of that is pervasive in nature. It's just like the survival of the fittest. Nature can be brutal. Some species are aggressive and take. You look at the predator prey dynamic. You have like elk or deer that might just be happy grazing in the fields. But then you have the predator that's like, how many deer can I get? And my existence is based off of taking, as opposed to just existing. It's an interesting way to think about it, I guess. The dynamics that exist, and how art affects the human perception of how we navigate society.
Right.
That was a long-winded way to say that.
No. But I think it's an important thing, because I read this the other day, and I thought it was interesting. I can't remember her name, but it was an early anthropologist, and she was a professor. And the little blib I read, a little art tidbit, was like, a student asked what was the first sign of civilization or advanced civilization, and expecting like some pots or some like type of like tool. The professor said that it was a healed leg bone, right? So it was like someone whose leg was broken, but they were saying this. Her point she was highlighting, this is, if in the wild like that, if you had a broken leg, you were left for dead. But when that was first found, they're like, this is an advanced, here's people that are caring for each other and caring for the wounded, and I thought that was a really profound answer.
It's something you wouldn't expect,
right?
But that someone had the insight to go, oh, hey, this sort of makes sense, because a bone doesn't really heal itself, and a society that knows enough that, okay, we're going to have to do something about this, or this person is going to die, and we want to save this person. And it is that more, it brings out, I suppose you could say altruism is a sign of an advanced brain, because because it doesn't exist in the id. It doesn't exist in the base functions of survival. Helping somebody else. If you were really just to think about things in a raw term, in nature, it's like, well, you come across, another animal that's hurt. Well, okay, that's their problem, and if they're gone, more food for me. But when you develop the ability to think beyond that and think, well, if I help this other being out to survive, then we'll be stronger as a unit, and we'll have, and things will be better for everyone, and that's be thinking beyond, one's own needs, and which is certainly a sign, I guess, of intelligence, at least at the human level. We don't know what aliens would think of us,
for sure,
or advanced civilizations would think of that, but I think that is certainly a sign of a grander intelligence, altruism, or just looking beyond one's own basic needs.
So to kind of spin it back to the record here, because now it's my turn. I have an interview at 2, or in a few minutes, or 20. I don't know what time. Yeah, 20.
Sure.
But I wanted to ask you if there's a similarity in any sort, right, that you found through songwriting and astronomy.
Well, I've been thought about that. Astronomy, songwriting is, yeah, I mean, you could, certainly astronomy for me is something that both is wondrous and also like hurts my brain at the same time, because it's as a human being you want to be able to understand things, and when you look at the universe and what we do know, which is amazing, if you go back to the Greek mathematicians that were able to figure out the diameter of the Earth just by putting a stick in the ground and measuring the shadow. The ability that we have to figure things out is just pretty mind blowing, and the fact that now we have one of our space probes is billions of miles away outside of our actual solar system now. And the fact that there's these distances, like we can see things, you can look, if you have a dark enough sky, you can see the Andromeda galaxy, which is 3 million light years away. And it's hard for the human brain to think about what 3 million light years is. Even.
Right. Yeah, it's near unfathomable. Like,
yeah, it's hard to conceive. Like, even if you explain it, that's how long it takes light to travel, in 3 million years, at 186,000 miles per second, and so in a way, songwriting can be sort of this mysterious thing, because some songs are like, as a songwriter, some songs just seem like they come out of nowhere. I'll have, maybe something happens in my head where I'll get an idea for some line or a chorus or something, and it'll just pop into my head, and I don't really necessarily know where that came from, and I'll just sort of keep, poking at it until I can, figure out how to put things together with it. And it's a little bit like astronomy in that way, because you want to have in songwriting some sort of continuity that's going to say something. It's not just a jumble of words that you decided to slap together. And and some artists can do that. I read a story about Tom Waits, who for a while he just got hired by whatever Capitol Records to be a songwriter, and he actually had an office, and he would go down to his office and he'd have a bunch of sticky pads, and he'd have a bunch of different lyrics that he would write down, individual lines of lyrics that he would write down on sticky pads, and he would just put them up on the wall, and until he would have hundreds of these things. And then to write a song, he would go and pick a couple, sometimes at random, or he would just go, oh, okay, that's the right one. I can use that one as the next one. And so that's pretty random, but, and that's one way to do it. There's nothing, who's to say, what's the right way to do it? That's, and obviously, Tom Waits is a extremely talented and very successful songwriter. For me, it's more about an idea that comes out of the ethos, and then drawing out other ideas that support that idea and give it continuity. And there are those moments when it just seems, and I'm not a religious person at all, but there's these moments where it just seems like it comes from somewhere else, that it's just coming out of the, space or whatever, and it drops into my brain, and I don't know how I thought of it, or why I thought of it, or how that came together. And then the craft part comes when you have to polish it. It's just like writing a book or something like that. Eventually you send it to your editor, and they try to make sense out of it to pull it together. Well, songwriting is all about revisions most of the time. Sometimes there's a few songs that I've written that I feel like have definitely come together as a really one point of light, sort of, where it was, it just seemed to make sense from the get-go, and I didn't have trouble writing it. But then there's others that take a long time, and you get a basic idea, but you still have to tease out the elements to support it and make it make sense. And so, I think, whereas, in science and in astronomy, it's like, well, okay, we figured out that there's galaxies that are moving away from us, and they have a redshift, and then there's objects that are moving towards us, and those have a blue shift in light. Why? Why is that happening? And so, in science and astronomy, oftentimes we'll discover a result, and then we have to support it with evidence that makes it make sense. And so I don't know if that all, makes sense, but that would be there's my answer.
Well, no, that makes sense, because it's like when there's a blip of inspiration, usually it's it's some type of song seed that's telling a narrative, and it's or a start to a narrative, or a start to a emotional exploration to be done by a song, and then like it's kind of proofing your theory, finding the narrative in that
Right.
in that similar sense. That's cool, man. Like I don't know, I've always been fascinated by astronomy, and like I love reading little bits from Neil deGrasse Tyson and watching like the cosmos, like all that stuff is fascinating. And like but with the title track of the record, right, that's where you wrote it, was waiting to do some stargazing.
Yeah, well, in the world of astronomy, there's what we all battle as astronomers is light pollution, and what a lot of people don't know is that one of the biggest forms of light pollution is actually the moon. And so the ideal conditions for astronomy is to be in number one, dark, clear skies with low humidity. And it just depends on what you're looking at. If you're looking at the planets are fairly close and bright. And so you can actually look at planets in under city lights, and it doesn't really affect it very much because they're so bright and they're so close. But if you want to look at what they call DSOs, deep space objects, you have to have dark skies, and you have to you have to let your eyes adapt to that. And so what happened with Waiting for the Moon is I was actually coming back from a festival, and I knew that I was going to go through dark sky areas, and so I decided to take my telescope with me. And I couldn't really use it at the festival; there was too many lights there. But when I got to Southern Oregon, it was actually Northern California, Northeastern California. There's a mountain range called the Warner Mountain Range, and one of my favorite things to do is to just drive off, like those map books, the Gazetteers.
Okay. Yeah.
Familiar with those? I would take one of those, and I would be like, "Well, there's a dirt road that looks like it goes in the middle of nowhere. I'm going to see. I'm going to check that out." And so I did that, and I got on this road, and it ended up at the top about over 7,000 feet in this mountain range, and at the top there was a small lake with a campground, and there was nobody there. And so I pulled in, and it actually turned out this a lake had where the water level was kind of low, and so I just kind of pulled out onto the shore of this lake and set up my camp. And I wanted to do some stargazing, but the moon was out, and it was going to go away, in a couple hours. And so I set up camp, got my campfire going, and pulled out my guitar. And I was just like, well, I'm just waiting for the moon to go down. And that's how that song came out. I made it a little bit, added a little bit of a storyline to it. But yeah, I was just sitting there waiting for the moon to go away so I could look at the stars. And once it did, I had this amazing night of stargazing. I mean, there was I could see galaxies and nebula and all the beautiful things. It was incredible it is really incredible. You could see, I mean, obviously, there's lots of, there's the James Webb and the Hubble Space Telescope that takes these amazing photographs, and you're never going to see views like that looking through a telescope, from the ground. You're not, typically when you look through a telescope with your eye, it's just black and white, because the light is so low that it's just really the rods in your eyes, which only see in black and white, can see this stuff. These color photographs are often adjusted color, or because the camera lens can be so much more sensitive than your eye and take long exposures, it can see these lights. But when you look through a lens on a telescope and you see something that's millions and millions of light years away, and like another galaxy which will have billions of stars and billions of suns, billions of suns and billions of planets, it just boggles your mind. And then think that you'll never go there. Maybe not in any lifetime, that would you ever be able to actually go to a place like this. You can just look at it, and think about it, but you'll never go there. And that's kind of the hard part, because it's like, you think about, my brother used to say, my brother was a school teacher, and he used to say, in college, they teach you about astronomy first to make you feel really small, and then they teach you about biology to make you feel big again. But it is, when you start,
that's good.
Yeah, when you start thinking about astronomy, it's like, man, we are such a small little speck.
Yeah.
In such a giant place, and the whole concept of infinite, it's like, well, we can't see the end of it, and we don't even know if there is an end to it. And where did it start? And why did it start? And where did, it hurts your brain if you think about it too much. Well, so, yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Definitely. And I think that's, in a way, that's the search for, like, kind of answers and understanding in, like, through that, and the knowing that there is, like how you said, we're never going to be able to go there, right? But there's a certain I think charge one gets from getting close to the to the unknown that carries through. You know what I mean? I think like there's an awe and an inspiration that comes from like thinking and exploring like that. And I think that definitely correlates to songwriting or any artistic or creative endeavor. And I think it definitely correlates to also flying in like in the realms of science and exploration. And But James, I've enjoyed talking with you a bunch, my friend. This has been awesome.
It was a great pleasure. I really enjoyed this too. I feel like if we lived in the same area, we'd probably be hanging out, buddies.
I'd agree so. I'd agree so, man. Well, if you're ever in Ohio, if you're ever in Cleveland, let me know. If I'm in Portland, I'll let you know.
That sounds great, man. I look forward to that too. It was really great to meet you and chat. I really enjoyed it.
Likewise.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig at the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.